2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. It was a Euro-American trade in slaves by which 12.5 million Africans were captured from their indigenous homelands and transported via the Atlantic to Europe and the Americas. The transatlantic slave, also known as triangular trade, was the worst form of man's inhumanity to man and the most costly in human life of all long-distance global migrations. Hundreds of Africans chained tightly to plank beds in the belly of slave ships in horrific conditions were transported via the Atlantic and stripped of all human dignity on arrival in Europe and America. It is the greatest crime the Caucasians committed against the black race. It is impossible to discuss the transatlantic slave trade without a copious reference to impoverishment and underdevelopment of Africa and its peoples. The triangular trade left the continent in ruins. Western Spring Television identifies transatlantic slave trade as a watershed event in history. The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had ab initio created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups in the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its sustenance. Western Spring Television identifies with Amalgamation Treaty of 1914 as a watershed event in history.
How to make a face mask at home. All you need is a piece of fabric and 2 rubber bands. Ready to wear. Ready to wear and look stylish.
Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
It's time for a brain booster.
Which object will not create a shadow? A glass, a phone, a dog. It's a glass. A glass won't make a shadow because it is transparent, meaning it allows all the light to pass through. Which one of the following statements is true? The sun is a star. The sun is a ball of hot gases. It takes 8 minutes for the light to travel from the sun to the earth. All of the above. It is all of the above. Who breathes in carbon dioxide and breathes out oxygen? Plants, animals, or people? It's plants. Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and produce oxygen in a process of photosynthesis. One of the reasons it is good to have a lot of plants around the house and compound.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love, from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889 at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children according to official records were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. It was a Euro-American trade in slaves by which 12.5 million Africans were captured from their indigenous homelands and transported via the Atlantic to Europe and the Americas. The transatlantic slave, also known as triangular trade, was the worst form of man's inhumanity to man and the most costly in human life of all long-distance global migrations. Hundreds of Africans chained tightly to plank beds in the belly of slave ships in horrific conditions were transported via the Atlantic and stripped of all human dignity on arrival in Europe and America. It is the greatest crime the Caucasians committed against the black race. It is impossible to discuss the transatlantic slave trade without a copious reference to impoverishment and underdevelopment of Africa and its peoples. The triangular trade left the continent in ruins. Western Spring Television identifies transatlantic slave trade as a watershed event in history. The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had ad initio created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups in the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its success.
Western Spring Television, ours it is.
Good morning. Thank you so much for linking up with us again. Amazing, amazing dial here. This is Western Spring Television, and we reach you live on Star Times DTT 190. You can also get us on all of our social media platforms on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter at Western Spring Television, and also watch us live on Western Spring Television on YouTube. My name is Femi Online. Good morning. It's the morning after the inauguration. It's a historic moment here, the end of an era, the beginning of another era.
All right, good morning and thank you for joining us again on Western Spring Television. It's no coincidence that the beginning of an era falls on a Monday, the first working day of the week. My name is Emmanuel Ojadigele once again. Thank you for joining us. And of course, we hope to bring you stories. We hope to bring you conversations that will help you better understand what is happening in the country and around you as a person and as a Nigerian generally.
Well, interesting. You were at the stadium yesterday.
Yes, I was.
That was momentous. That was something else entirely.
If it wasn't something else, I would have been shocked because, you know, returning to power after a dozen years, so to say,
12 years.
It really calls for that kind of celebration, what we saw yesterday at the stadium.
And so, aside the residents of Osun that trunked the stadium, filled the stadium to the brim, security agents had a hectic time yesterday controlling the crowd. You also look at the VIPs and ground. It treats who is who, like a list of who is who in Nigeria. So in the PDP side, governors, you are the presidential candidates of the party, many other dignitaries who came to felicitate and celebrate with the people of Osun, especially Governor Ademola Adeleke.
Yeah, it was a testament to the fact that it was really an auspicious event, and of course, seeing those kind of people, the caliber of persons who came, I was particularly surprised to see some names who weren't expecting them. Aminu Tambuwal, all the way from the north, coming down to the southwest to celebrate with his brother governor, as it were. It was really an exciting one yesterday. When the governor took his oath, you could feel the emotions flying all around, carrying on the Adeleke dynasty from his elder brother, whose administration was truncated by the military, down to, years after, about 19 years after, another Adeleke sits on the #1 seat of the state. It's amazing.
And I do hope, Emmanuel, that the weight of expectation is not lost on the governor. So, I mean, as you bask in the euphoria of coming into office, we should also know that the people are expecting lots of things. I mean, expectations, and expectations. The honeymoon period will be short.
It will be very short. Reality will dawn on him.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, it's Monday morning, and we expect that the governor will resume at work today immediately, effectively immediately. And, well, we've had some, statements issued yesterday, appointments made yesterday. We've had some, statement also as regards the governor's speech. We'll be talking about that in detail on the program, and some of our guests joining us. But let's take this short break. When we return, we'll be bringing you the newspapers this morning on Modern Spring. All right, thank you so much. Morning Spring, let's begin with the newspapers this morning. I start with the Punch newspaper, Emmanuel. Well, above the nameplate, maybe we won't talk about that as such, really, but, the NMMA, the awards for media, for the media industry held yesterday, and the Punch newspaper won the newspaper of the year again. I think Channels Television also won the Channels Television, the TV of the year for the 15th time, but that's by the side. But let's focus on some of the main gist of the dailies today. The banner headline of the paper is something that'll be worrying for the average Nigerian. Fuel scarcity, NNPC, petrol price without subsidy is 400 naira per litre. That's according to marketers. 400 naira per litres. With the riders, oil firms struggling with subsidies, government cannot be Father Christmas, IPMAN, NNPC, NMDPRA, keep mum, over 30,000 filling stations face shortage. You can get details of that story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper, Emmanuel. It's I don't know. I mean, well, here we are again.
It became really worrisome, when we started seeing queues in the commercial capital of the country, in Lagos. And interestingly, as of Thursday, Friday last week, here in Oshogbo, Osun State, we've begun seeing queues and people, parking their cars, constituting traffic gridlock just to get fuel. Like I said before, it's disheartening to see that this is happening again, and then it's really alarming that without subsidy, we would have to buy petrol at 400 naira per litre. Well,
so I mean, it appears to be a very difficult one, really, for Nigeria. I mean, it's been talked about removing subsidy. If you ask economists, they're not even there's no uniformity of position on what to do with subsidy. There are those who say remove subsidy, free up all of these funds for government to spend on other sectors. There are those who say this is perhaps the only social security that every Nigerian benefit from government. So if you withdraw it, aside the fact that you have no access to that social security again, every other thing jumps up. Every other thing goes up.
Transport,
because everything
food.
is tied to petrol.
Yes, everything. Even the doctor who goes to treat in private hospitals has to drive a car or body or vehicle. And it's going to be a little bit, if not very difficult for the common man. There are people who can afford this without even, batting an eyelid. But we need to look at those who are really, really at the grassroots.
And it's biting harder, we should stress. It's biting harder. That's because, in some parts of Osun State, even aside the capital, some major towns in Osun State are struggling to have, regular supply. Someone spoke with me yesterday and said she drove around town, not here in Oshogbo, around town, and she couldn't buy petrol.
And
She slept in the dark yesterday because she didn't fuel a generator. You know, and that's one of the major towns of of the state. And even where you see, you buy well above 200 naira.
And then that person has burnt fuel to get fuel without getting
eventually.
It's crazy. It's worrisome.
Yeah, so let's get some of the other headlines here, and it's about Oshun, the historic moment here in Oshun State. Adeleke reverses Oyetola's appointment, says action malicious.
Well, that's been a major statement that the Adeleke administration has been touting. You know, immediately they were declared winners of the election. According to them, those appointments were vindictive. But some persons have the opinion, we'll see that later on Spring Trend, some persons have the pure opinion that government cannot exist in vacuum. You can't stop governing because you lost an election when you still have a few days in office. But then they want to argue about the morality and not the legality now, morality and of some of these actions. And we'll see. He says he will set up a panel to review. We'll see what the panel says and if those things were done.
There were also some other decisions made yesterday, the reversal of the name, of the name of the state from state of Oshun to Oshun State.
Instead of the virtuous to state of
living spring. And then some executive orders to give some legal backing to some of these decisions about freezing the accounts of the state, about the reversal of the panel we talked about, and some of the other ones. But, it promises to be an interesting week. I mean, so interesting weeks ahead, because you need now to begin to monitor and check the level of engagement of the new government with Labour. Labour will be on the other side. Labour perhaps will not care if the appointment were made legally or illegally, or morally or immorally. We'll begin to see how some of this drama will pan out in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. But let no one kid you. This is really an Herculean task for the new government.
Yes, it is, because we are transitioning from from one political party to another, and we cannot take away the rancor that exists between both parties. And that means that some of major decisions like this one, some policies, some actions will have to be overturned. We should be, at this point, not try to cover things up. Definitely, he has said it himself, it will be overturned, and that means that continuity may be affected. The governor may want to discontinue some projects and programs, which may leave some persons who had been benefiting from it hanging. I particularly want to see what becomes of the food support scheme. I want to see, because, to a large extent, a lot of persons have benefited. So is the new governor going to stop it? Will he continue or make it better? We would like to see which of those policies he will retain. All
right, so we'd like to see, we wait to see that. On the front page still, election results, nationwide e-transmission possible, says telcos. Perhaps that puts to rest all of these issues as to if poor network. So if the telcos themselves are saying we can achieve these, I think that puts to rest that argument. It's on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. On page 5, Saudi-bound trafficker conceals cocaine in sandals. So lots of very interesting places where some of these drug dealers and drug smugglers hide their cocaine.
We must give kudos to the NDLA for doing their job efficiently. Some time ago, we saw that people were hiding drugs rather, in packaged food, baby food. They put these things inside of sandals, inside of tires, inside of even belt linings. Every very genius way now to put it.
Or disingenuous.
Disingenuous way to conceal those things. Even in tubers of yam, that's the one that I still cannot understand until today. When they opened up the yam and then found the drugs, I was wondering, did they plant the drugs with the yam? Did they grow with the yam? How did it happen? So that's to show you that people are getting, more devious. And of course, the NDLA is matching them strength for strength and power for power. All
right. So this other headline, Yuletide, NCDC warns of possible COVID-19 infection rise. I thought we were over. But then, you remember there's news over last week about China locking down one of its, one town like that. China seems to be unable to get over this COVID-19 issue. But here is NCDC rather, warning and trying to prepare our minds and saying we should not, let down our guards, and we should actually be careful and be wary of a resurgence of COVID-19. Well, that's the dailies. That's the punches band. You know, all of the, I mean, virtually all of the pictures on the front page of the Punch newspaper is about the new governor of Osun State, Ademola Adeleke. Here is signing the, you know, oath of office, you know, if that's what I call it. And then you see a mammoth crowd of residents of Osun who thronged the stadium. He had a hectic time getting into the stadium yesterday, and so some dignitaries actually stayed outside. They couldn't access the stadium until the end. You know, they were caught up in what was, you know, a very, very difficult traffic jam yesterday. They couldn't enter. And then you also, another one here, the governors, we came to celebrate and felicitate with the new governor yesterday. So that's the Punch newspaper.
Well, that's the Punch newspaper this morning. We'll move on to the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper, Monday, November 28th, 2022. The banner headline is one that is coming on a sad note. 2023, another attack on INEC office raises concern over polls. IG orders CPs to take actions. Commission 6 probe into attacks on facilities. And that's the banner headline this morning on the Nation newspaper. The story is continued on page 4, but that was in Ebonyi State. Another attack on INEC office is raising concern over the polls. Over the last few months, we've seen attacks.
Quite unfortunate. Lots of INEC offices and infrastructure destroyed in the last 10, 11 months, and it's worrying. You know, you're worried about the preparedness of INEC. You're worried. INEC is doing a lot to get ready for the polls, but then all of these attacks eat into the preparedness of INEC. You know, you need to rebuild offices, and there's been targeted and coordinated attack on INEC properties in the southeast. You know, I don't know what the end game is, but it's definitely not good. And perhaps the security agencies also need to step up to protect INEC facilities across the nation.
Well, definitely not good. Just above that story, federal government bans export of raw gold. Federal government bans export of raw gold. You have that story on the Nation newspaper this morning. And above the nameplate, you have Adeleke, I will strengthen security, boost workers' welfare. I will strengthen security, boost workers' welfare. That formed part of the governor's inaugural speech yesterday, talking about how he would ensure that labor, the glory of labor is restored to its former glory, and also strengthening security and all of that. And we did see a lot of heavy security presence yesterday, perhaps because of the nature of the program. But we want to see how that translates into the state at large. Because in the last you know, 4 years, there were increased. I saw a statement about from a non-governmental organization over the weekend that people complained about the increase in activities of land grabbers. Yes. And then daylight attack by miscreants.
Yes.
You know, it was on the rise, and we look forward to seeing how Governor Adeleke would tackle that. Still on the Nation newspaper. Yeah, you wanted to say something.
Yes, so I mean, I do hope that it gets a hang on that. You know, that's a worrying trend. And if you look at it, I don't know how our politicians and our leaders get to see it, but it impacts on the growth of the state. I mean, so someone, you know, cobbles together some funds, gets a loan, wants to build a house, and someone, you know, from nowhere comes and said he wants to go. Some non-state actors. That's how government cedes, you know, authority to non-state actors. I mean, that's how you begin to lose your authority, your power over. I mean, when non-state actors begin to exercise such powers, you know, over policy. I do hope that things do not degenerate. I do hope that things, you know, are stabilized in that area.
All right, still on the newspaper, Nation newspaper this morning. Tinubu, most experienced candidate, says Ayade. Azura targets 3,500 megawatts power generation. Morocco's win over Belgium thrills Okocha again. Another underdog upsetting
So it appears that Qatar 2022 has been a World Cup of upsets.
Yes,
not in short supply at all. So we had Morocco.
Of all countries.
Emmanuel Morocco.
Beating Belgium, the long-time reigning #1 team in the world.
And the Belgian national team seems to be sort of a wasted golden generation.
Yes.
You know, packed with world-class stars. from Kevin De Bruyne to others.
Eden Hazard, Michy Batshuayi, all of those.
You know, I mean, someone said they were missing, what's his name? Lukaku yesterday. I mean, I find that to be a lame excuse.
Well,
I mean, with the quality
of the players
of the players in there. How come? How did it? I didn't get to see the game.
Well, I didn't get to see it too.
How did Morocco do it?
Well, things happen the same way Qatar upset, Saudi Arabia upset Argentina, and the same way Japan gave it hot to Germany.
You know, I'm loving this World Cup, but you know, it's a World Cup of upsets. And, you know, unfortunately, I think there was some reaction back home in Brussels.
Yes,
there was some riots, you know, I mean, that was absolutely unfortunate. We'd like to see what the Saudi Arabian government did after the win against Argentina. I mean, those are the positive sides. We don't like to see the negative sides. Yes. I mean, those riots are absolutely unnecessary from the Belgians.
Very quickly, before we move on to the Daily Trust, the Nation newspaper still under the nameplate. You have NRC to enforce no NIN, no ticket on Abuja Kaduna. No trip skill for bandits. That's on the Nation newspaper. You can get that story there. Disquiet in customs service as top officials seek tenure extension. Disquiet. I often wonder what they mean by disquiet. Every now and then, you know, they say disquiet. Yeah,
disquiet. I mean, so there's supposed to be some quiet, some people are putting this behind it. You know,
well, let's see if the customs service will yield to the demand of this top officers for me.
Okay, what's up? That's all about the Nation newspaper. Let's check Daily Trust newspaper here now. So Daily Trust also won some things at the NMMA award. You know, lots of media organizations won there. But let's give you the banner headline of the Daily Trust newspaper. Anti-money laundering, SMEs decry registration hurdles. With the riders, account opening process frustrating business owners. Banks reject applications. Scum procedure not cumbersome. EFCC. The SCUM is SCUML. The procedure not cumbersome. I mean, so we've talked about the ease of doing business. So as much as we would like to put in registration, put in you know, processes and methods that will protect the nation and protect, you know, perhaps other bank and other financial dealers from you know, fraud and what have you. Try and mitigate fraud really in the financial services sector. We should also not put too much hurdles on the way, such that the ease of doing business becomes nonsense.
Yes, even for ordinary citizens, it's difficult. I can get what business owners are saying about account opening process. You know, even to I recently had an issue with one of my bank accounts, you know, and it took days and days just to upgrade the account.
Before it was resolved.
Yes, before it was resolved. So you can imagine I have a business and I needed to move some funds or receive some funds that would have crippled my business activity for those number of days. So I do agree that we want to sanitize the system. We want to make it more efficient, but at the same time, we should not make it, you know, more cumbersome for people. You know, the hurdles should be removed. We understand the place, the importance of the hurdles, but at least make it something that can be mitigated, you know.
But Emmanuel, I think at the core of this is the lack of a national database, a lack of a national, you know, regulated, coordinated identity framework for the average Nigerian. You know, like in most other countries, everyone has an NIN. So every other system, every other agency feeds from that database. But I mean, there's an absence of that. We do not even know how many we are in Nigeria.
And that's why you have the duplication of ministries, duplication of agencies, and duplication of processes too. If I have had my biometrics done in a particular bank using the details I submitted to the country, the NIN.
You know how many times you do biometrics?
Yes,
you know how many agencies has your details?
Yes. You can just pull it from a central database and upload. The same way the BVN works now. You can do that for identity too. But
so there should be a central, you know, and that's what the NIMC, I believe, should be about. But unfortunately, some of these things do not work as they should, because I don't know why you should do a biometrics for BVN, you do a biometrics for NIN, you do a biometrics for INEC, you do how many for FRSC, for your driver's license, you do biometrics. Like you came to the world to do biometrics. You know?
it's a funny one, and I think that that's why most persons are resorting to self-help, you know, going through although helps growth for, POS operators, but at the same time, even the POS operators themselves have issues. So it's just a matter of lessening the real issue. We need to come to a place where we have a synchronized database where I'm not saying the AFCC saying the procedure is not cumbersome. Of course, we know we're in the digital age, but in Nigeria here, we still move files. People still have to manually search through their desk to look for when did you submit your application, when did you submit your files. Those things should have been gone by now. With a single click of a button, you should be able to pull up my information.
All right, so some other headlines just below the nameplate. INEC Ebonyi office raised 340 ballot boxes, others destroyed. Change of button name as Adeleke takes charge of Oshun. And beside the main picture on the news of the newspaper, which is really about the newspaper winning some awards there. Finance Ministry denies budget pardon. You know, remember we had that
back to budget
last
pardon.
week. Yeah,
so who pardons the budget?
Who pardoned
the ministry's denied.
Yeah. Okay. So importers kick as cost of containers from China rises by 2.6 million naira. That's another disheartening one, Emmanuel. I read. We do not have the time again, but I read some articles sometimes ago. Someone did an analysis of how much it takes to transfer a container from China to Lagos, and how much it takes to transfer from Lagos to Onitsha. You might not believe me, it costs like times 2 more to transfer that same container from Lagos to Onitsha than from China to Lagos. Yeah, I mean, so it talks about, you know, some challenges that we have really in this system, but maybe we have some more time to talk about that some other time. Kaduna Abuja train, FG shifts resumption, malls fare hike. Well, many people will be happy that the Kaduna Abuja train is about to resume operations again.
Yes, and we saw on the Nation newspaper that the NRC, that's the Nigeria Railway Corporation, would want to enforce the no NIN, no ticket. That's axis, but ensure that there is security, ensure that you can monitor the people, because using the NIN now makes it easier to identify who and who boarded to play the train rather, and that means that in case of any unfortunate incident, you know who to reach. You know, most persons languish in captivity because their family members can be reached.
Cannot reach them.
Yeah, so
really. I mean, that unfortunate terrorist attack on the train, you know, many people could not be accounted for, because the names on the manifest was different from perhaps, you know, some people just wrote a single name, you know, just write Emmanuel or just write Femi, for instance. You don't know what the surname, where the person is. But having an NIN, it's going to be difficult for some people to access, because some people still do not have the NIN up till now. But then it helps a lot. And I think there should be some guidance as to how we synchronize. Like, I mean, that was the choice of what we used the other time. In our database, let's have a central database that coordinates. Everybody has an identity, has a number, and it is what we use even to access social services. That's how proper SANAC in a country
climbs.
Oh, as you say, SANAC climbs is an abuse. But I mean, so that's that we do hope we get it right. If we get, just like if we get power, electricity right in Nigeria, if we get the data aspect also of policy and planning right, a lot of things really will fall in place for us, and it makes it even easier for government to plan, to implement, and then even to project into the future.
Yes, of course, it does make it easier. Well, that's too much we can take on the newspaper review segment of the program this morning. We'll be bringing you the interview segment with some of our guests to make sense of some of the things that are happening in Osun State.
And then so after that, Emmanuel will come to give us what's trending. He's promised us to give something.
I have an airplane to show you, made in Osun, and that will be transporting. Let's get there.
I like to see that. I'll be back after this break.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love, from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889, at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children, according to official records, were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had ad initio created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups in the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its sustenance. Western Spring Television identifies with Amalgamation Treaty of 1914 as a watershed event in history.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Morning Spring, reaching you from Western Spring Television. Do not forget to follow us on all of our social media handles, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Western Spring Television. But on Twitter, it's WSTV_NJ. And do well to also check us out on YouTube. In fact, you can watch us live on YouTube at Western Spring Television. And on that YouTube, when you get there, subscribe to that channel. It's very important that you subscribe to the channel. You know, what about the other social media?
Yeah, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you can also follow us And tag us to your comment at Western Spring Television. On Twitter, it's at WSTV_NG. But on Facebook and Instagram, it's still Western Spring Television.
All right, so it's the day after the inauguration. It's the day after the new governor was sworn in. Senator Ademola Jackson Nuruddin Adeleke became the 6th executive governor of Osun State yesterday after he was sworn in at the stadium here in Osogbo. It was a something huge, you know, as some of those comedians will say. It was massive. You said it earlier on, you know, about side the ordinary residents who think the stadium, you know, suggest that it's the end of an era and the beginning of a new era, and the weight of expectations also very huge of the PDP, the new party in power. And the man who midwifed the sort of, you know, the transition, was chairman of the transition committee, you know, of the PDP, try and gather some facts for the incoming governor to work with. He will be talking to us this morning and also helping us have a better understanding of some of the decisions, some of the statements, you know, released yesterday in terms of some of the announcements made by the new governor yesterday about some of the, you know, things that will guide us going forward. We're joined live in the studios this morning. Dr. Muyiwa Oladimeji is a medical doctor. He's a chairman of the Transition Committee of the PDP, and he was a member of the House of Representatives in the Third Republic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you too.
This morning. Thank you. And congratulations to you again.
Thanks. Thank you.
So your party is back in power 12 years after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, how does it feel?
Well, just waking up for the first day. It's like any other day, except that we realize one point. Winning an election is a big challenge. It's a very, it means lots of work. But we realize quickly that the business of good governance is even more daunting and challenging than winning an election. So when you say, what does it feel? I just feel more challenged. We feel more challenged because we know that we have to hit the ground running based on what is available. So, like you said, lots of people were there, and the expectations of the people from a PDP government is such that we cannot afford to let the people down. So it's not a time for pettiness. It's just to hit the ground and start doing things that we think are essential for the proportion state.
All right, so just before we begin to dissect the speech of the governor, the gross speech of the governor yesterday, you chaired the transition committee, worked for a couple of weeks with some other people.
A couple of months,
rather, you know, on that team. You mind taking us back again? Did you eventually get to meet with the government? Did you eventually get to perhaps get access to some of the data, some of the facts from the outgoing government?
Well, very interesting. It's simply, I can say we didn't get to. We wrote a letter to the outgoing government, His Excellency Oyetola. You know, the governor wrote the incumbent governor, Nuruddin Adeleke, wrote him a letter that there's a transition committee and would like to interface, you know, interact with his own team so that we can be brought up on issues. But no response. He made some calls. We didn't get any response. And because of his the body language didn't make the very senior guys in the government were not cooperating. I mean, you could understand they were reluctant to relate to us, which is understandable. They need to keep their job. They can't afford to offend the chief executive there. Even though, as I've always said, in government, you know, and in any organization, you may be the top most executive, but you may not be the one who is going to type some of the information. So we keep our secret. Just make sure you do all good things all the time, because just your secret will get out one day or the other. We know that the secrets of yesterday are information for today. So Governor Oyetola's government, the outgone APC government, did not cooperate with us at all. Funny enough, the last week of the administration, which also reminds me of Donald Trump. The last week of the administration, they got in touch with us, I think on Wednesday, wanting to interact with us. Okay, we thought, all right, let's see. And we asked what time, and it's Friday, 2 p.m. For God's sake, Friday was the last working day for the government. 2 p.m., which means we're going to interact with them just for 3 hours. Well, I mean, even everybody knows that 3 hours isn't enough to interact, to ask questions, to dissect some of the issues. So they're just jokers. What they want to give to us is probably handover note, which they can hand over to the most senior civil servants, you know, and we collect from him. We are not there. They were not serious on transition program and relating to the transition committee. So that explains it all.
Were there on official meetings? I mean, so perhaps you wrote letter, there was, I mean, there was no response whatsoever.
Yes, then now they wrote us a letter.
Yes.
Now that they wanted to meet us.
I mean, that was at
that was the last week.
Yes.
And then they wanted to meet us on Friday, 2 p.m., which is the last working day of that administration. And 2 p.m., 5 p.m., they close. I mean, what we wanted and what we expected was that there will be a team from the government, the outgoing government, that will meet our team on different issues, and we'll all talk together as Osun indigents so that we can understand what they have done and some of the things that they have not done. And you know, from that interaction, we will even be better informed on how to go ahead. This is what good governance is about. You probably remember that the only person who behaved this way in the last 100 years, even in America, is Donald Trump. When Joe Biden won, he refused to allow his team to meet Joe Biden on the last week, when the equivalent of the head of service told the guys that if you have anything, go and meet them.
Well, it's quite interesting to hear this angle to the back and forth on the transition committee, and well, that's over and done with now, and we expect that the governor will get to work immediately. Now let's talk about some of the talking points from yesterday's inaugural speech that has got a lot of persons talking, even on social media. Especially, I'll start with the governor's executive orders. You know, the governor said some things about Governor Adegboyega Oyetola being vindictive and maliciously making appointments, mass employment. Now he has said that status quo should be maintained from July 17th.
Status quo ante.
From July 17th, 2022. And on point 36, appointment of several obas were hurriedly done without following due process. Just to mention a few. The appointment of obas, do they also fall into the category of status quo ante?
Yes, I would think so. Because the truth of the matter was that there are many things that if the administration of Oyetola was sincere, many of the things they started rushing to do after losing the election and things that they should have done much like mass promotion, mass employment. And this is an administration that claimed it had difficulty meeting the needs of the civil servants, and yet it decided. So we see it more as a political landmine that, look, let's do this, then this will find it impossible or difficult to govern. And that's, I mean, will you believe that over the target was 12,500 staff were to be recruited? And by the time they were going, they had recruited 10,000 in different categories. And then promotion. You know, even on the last Thursday or so, there was about 30 or so permanent secretaries who were sworn in. Why the hurry? So by saying status quo ante, that's to give us time to look thoroughly at these things. Whether, I mean, nobody is being sacked, but we're going to look at it thoroughly, whether those people deserve the promotion or not, or whether these are also political promotions to gratify those who they think they need to gratify. That's all we're going to do. As far as the obas are concerned, they fall into category that, look, if you suddenly, I mean, see what's happening in Ekiro. There's unrest in Ekiro. So when that kind of thing is done, I wish, I mean, well, I'm not sorry that it's out of government, but he could have done it earlier to clean his rubbish. Then maybe when he sees what is happening, he say he would have learned better. But you do it and you are going away. So that means you are leaving a lot of nonsense, rubbish for us to clear. And that's why the governor said status quo ante. The status quo ante is all embracing.
Well, status quo ante is all embracing, but you said something now that nobody is being sacked.
Yes. We're not. Yes, we're not. We're going to look. Look, if a new employee, if somebody was employed, due process was followed, we know. But if the process, if it was a hurriedly arranged employment, then as far as we're concerned, it's not valid.
So what do you mean is nobody's getting sacked now?
There'll be nobody sacked among the civil servants that were in place up till July 16. All the new appointments after July 17, when Senator Nuruddin Adeleke was declared winner of the governorship election, all those new appointments will be looked thoroughly into.
So I mean, looking into it, could that mean that some of them may go, I mean, may be sacked eventually?
Yes, well, I'm not using the word sack. I'm not using the word sack.
Okay.
Some of them will be told that if it's an improv, will be told that the process through which they were brought on board was not adequate and does not meet the civil service regulations. We're not going to do it. I'm a politician, and I've never worked in the civil service. The nearest I did was to work in the public service when I was a lecturer at the University of Ife years back. So I don't know. So we're getting civil servants, retired farm secretaries onto some committees that will look thoroughly at these things and advise us.
Well, if you're doing that, point 32 says, I wish to assure all labor unions in the state of our administration's willingness to protect workers' interest and promote their welfare at all times. We will be a labor-friendly government. If the government is starting on this note, where does that put it with labor?
I think you are wrong. Those ones are not yet members of the labor union. They are not yet members. These are guys who have just been employed, or seemingly, that they are just who have just been brought on board. May I also inform you that the labor union understands what we are doing.
Well, the chairman of the NLC in Osun State was part of those inaugurated on Thursday.
Was part of those, yes, yes. as
permanent secretary.
Yes. But the labor union, and I say without fear of contradiction, the labor union understands and appreciates what we are doing. And I'm not going to talk further on that.
Okay.
That the labor union understands. Maybe I should also tell you that even during the election, we related with labor union. Do you think anybody will go into an election and not relate with labor union? The permanent secretary, I mean, the head of, we know, you see, there are some labor leaders who, because of the position they occupy and because of the law of governance, they more or less abandon the membership. And the members know this. And they are part of government, no longer part of, their main interest was their own, not that of the union. So we know this. There's a dichotomy, even in the unions, rather, yes. So that president of NLC was one of them. So what? That's his vote is one vote. And the vote of the sweeper is also one vote.
Okay, so I mean, part of the executive orders yesterday was also the freezing of all bank accounts immediately. I mean, we reckon that would be to avoid people pilfering, I mean, government funds. But, you know, more importantly, and I'd like to ask the significance of this, was the immediate reversal of the name of the state from State of Osun to Osun State, and then the slogan of the state from State of the Virtuous to State of the Living Spring. I'd like you to explain to our viewers the significance really of that.
Well, I'm sure maybe you don't know that even in the Constitution up till today, it is Osun State, not State of Osun. That's what the Constitution recognizes, the Osun State. This acronym, State of Osun, initially I thought it was a joke when Governor Aregbesola started it. But little by little, it became formalized in its governance. But it's, at the federal level, that's not what is there. It is Osun State. So, I may also ask the question. I don't know. We all definitely, no matter what your specialty or discipline is, at least we all did elementary English at school SAT. Otherwise, you won't be able to go into any higher education. Do you call it State of California, or State of New York, or State of Michigan? It's Michigan State, Illinois, California State, Georgia State. Where did this? You see, sometimes when people get into power, they assume that they are custodians or they have a monopoly of so much knowledge, and sometimes they misfire. That acronym, State of Osun, was one of those misfiring by the previous governments. and we have reverted back to what is normal. That's what we've done. Then the other question, what was
the slogan of the state, from state of the virtuous to state of the living spring?
Yeah, that's what the state of the living spring was. What we had during the last time was what we had during Akode's time, was what we had.
During last time, you mean?
Yes, I said Unilola.
You said Itola.
No, sorry, I'm sorry. I said during your last time. That's what we had during Akonde's time. That's what we had during the first executive governor of this state. That was Isiaka Adeleke. You know, that was what we have. So what's all this changing and changing? Otherwise, if you don't stop such trends, somebody else will come day after tomorrow and say state of waterworks or state of waters. What you know, we're just going back to being realistic and keeping to tradition and the name as it was ab initio. And mind you, those who changed the name in quotes never even explained why or gave any reasons why they had to do that.
Well, still talking about the governor's executive order, yes. 39B says immediate establishment of a panel to carry out an inventory and recover all government assets. Recover is an interesting choice of word.
Let me also tell you this, because part of the question you asked was bank freezing of the accounts.
Yes.
In the last 2 weeks of the administration, in spite of the letter that we wrote, in spite of the fact that we had written the administration that they should tally, they should take it slow in terms of expenditures, money. But of course, rightly, they are still in government and they can do whatever. The amount of money that has gone, that, you know, all debts that were paid, contract that were blah, 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 is, to say, humongous, if I can use such a word. That's why the issue of freezing the account now, so we can in fact look at all the books and see where we are. So we have to know where we are. I mean, economy is the basis of, is a basis for governance, isn't it? So you have to know exactly where you are economically rather than what people tell you are. That's why the accounts have been frozen, just to give us time to look thoroughly into the things. That was another question you just asked.
About recovery
of assets.
How much does Toyota Prado cost? A brand new one. Do you know? You have an idea?
Yes.
How much?
We would say tens of millions.
Yes, not less than 44, about 44 million. If you have that, and suddenly somebody buys it for less than $1 million, what do you do?
Oh, I mean, that's what the outgoing administration did.
I've just asked that. I've just said something. I'm not saying that's what I say. If somebody buys it, so we're going to look at all that. As far as we're concerned, those such properties will be recovered. But we had insinuations, we had that such things, and we suspect, and we have good reasons to suspect that that attitude was brought up. People buying in their official cars and whatever at paltry expenses. So with all that and many other things, so that's why we say we're going to look at it. And it's also natural, it's only natural to try and see whether some of your properties as a government, I mean, if you are moving, if you are moving to a house when you were a civil servant, if you were working in the university and you're moving to a house and you are moving that house, the university comes and do an inventory to see that the fridge they put there, the furniture is all there, isn't it? So that's what we are doing.
Well, it is also interesting, still looking at the governor's speech, it is also interesting that the governor, I would say for the first time in a long time, we have a governor talking about climate change and ICT. He says our administration will collaborate with development partners to address problems of environmental pollution and climate change. Will equally promote digital literacy, tech innovations, and create opportunities for our teaming youth in the ICT sector. Climate change, realistically.
Climate change. Well, I mean, I think if you want to put it, if you want to simplify it, it's talking about sustainable environmental practices. I mean, the abuse of the environment worldwide has led to climate change. And if some of us, I mean, who have been working in the environmental sector for some time, will tell you point blank that the abuse of environment is mainly a Western issue. I mean, the developed countries have abused the environment more than any country. Now that they're saying go green, it's like they want us to pay for go green. And we must say no. But what the governor itself says is that even right now, the youths and everybody must learn to appreciate that the environment must be protected, must be preserved, because the environment of today is what your generations later will stay in. Let me give you an example. Osun State, like many of the southwestern states, is gradually becoming savanized because we have cut down a lot of the big trees. We have refused to plant many of the Iroko trees. And so you find that our rainforests is not as thick as it was. If you took the picture from, it's not as it was when I was a kid. Even as it was some 30 years ago, gradually depleting. These are very pronounced defects that must be tackled from now. We either start planting the trees to make sure that your kids, live in a better environment. Because once you do that, if you don't do that, even things like erosion will come. If the trees are there, it prevents erosion. So we are going to be very mindful of environmental abuse. And that's why we are going to. And then when he talked about climate change, from ordinary biology or nature study in primary school, everybody knows rather that the human being breathes in oxygen and carbon dioxide comes out, and that the plants doing photosynthesis, taking carbon dioxide, and they give us oxygen. If you destroy all the plants and coal without thinking of how to replace them, then it's going to have more heat. And I'm sure you appreciate the fact that when you have trees and things like that in places, it's cooler than when you don't. So we don't want to keep depending on AC all the time. So we are in Osun State, by the grace of God, we are going to be more mindful of the environment and have sustainable environmental practice.
Well, I'd like to thank you most sincerely for joining us on Morning Spring this morning. Dr. Muyiwa Oladimeji, Chairman of the PDP Transition Committee, we appreciate you and wish you the very best in government.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning.
Well, so that's the first.
Congratulations on this new studio.
Thank you very much, sir.
Wish you all the best. Yes.
Thank you. Well, so that's the first leg of the interview. We'll take a break. When we return, we're bringing in our second guest on Morning Spring this morning.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love, from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889, at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children, according to official records, were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. It was a Euro-American trade in slaves by which 12.5 million Africans were captured from their indigenous homelands and transported via the Atlantic to Europe and the Americas. The transatlantic slave, also known as triangular trade, was the worst form of man's inhumanity to man and the most costly in human life of all long-distance global migrations. Hundreds of Africans chained tightly to plank beds in the belly of slave ships in horrific conditions were transported via the Atlantic and stripped of all human dignity on arrival in Europe and America. It is the greatest crime the Caucasians committed against the black race. It is impossible to discuss the transatlantic slave trade without a copious reference to impoverishment and underdevelopment of Africa and its peoples. The triangular trade left the continent in ruins. Western Springer Television identifies transatlantic slave trade as a watershed event in history. The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had an issue created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups in the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its sustenance. Western Springer Television identifies with Amalgamation Treaty of 1914 as a watershed event in history.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Do not forget, as we tell you always, to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on YouTube.
And on Instagram, Twitter is at Western Spring Television. Facebook, Instagram, Western Spring Television. On Twitter, it's at WSTV_NG, at WSTV_NG. You can follow us, you can tag us, you can mention us on your tweets, on your conversations, and we can try to bring them on here to make sense of them.
Well, so and on our YouTube channel, where you can watch us live, all of our activities here, all of our broadcasts, do well to subscribe. It's very important. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. And so it's still the day after the inauguration, historic, the beginning of a new era, the end of an old era. And so attention is on what happened yesterday at the Oshogbo Township Stadium, where the new governor, Senator Ademola Adeleke, was sworn in as the 6th executive governor of Osun State, bringing to an end the time of Governor Adegboyega Oyetola. And he had a speech, very interesting one yesterday at the stadium. How many paragraphs, Emmanuel? I think we had about 60 something. Okay, 52 paragraphs. you know, of speech, inaugural speech of the governor yesterday. So we'll still be reviewing, because that sets the tone as to what to expect for the next 4 years. I mean, for this governor. I mean, so make some decisions, gave some executive orders and some others. So we'll be reviewing this with our guest in the studio, who is a journalist, is a public affairs analyst, is also a policy analyst, is a social affairs commentator. He joins us live in the studio this morning. Mr. Ayolo, thanks so much for joining us on Morning Spring.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, I mean, because you were not at the stadium yesterday, but you must have followed proceedings live, where we had the swearing in of the 6th executive governor of Osun State, and he had his inaugural speech. Tell me what you make of that speech.
Well, first and foremost, congratulations to him and to the people of Osun State. It's the beginning of a new dawn, and it's our prayer that his time will bring a lot of prosperity and good fortune to the state. We're talking about his speech yesterday. For me, with all due respect, that inaugural speech fell below expectation for me, because the essence of an inaugural speech is for very key policies that will guide the administration for that 4 years to have been pronounced, and of course plans that will guide the administration in 4 years to have been stated. First of all, there were contradictions in that inaugural speech. There was a part of that speech where he ordered that all appointments and what have you, July 17 up till yesterday, when he was sworn in as the governor, should refer to the status quo. And just somewhere along in the same inaugural speech, he did mention the fact that he was going to put a committee in place to review the same appointment and policy. You don't retrograde and appropriate at the same time. If you have ordered that all appointments pre-July 17 should refer to status quo, what else? What then is the essence of putting together a committee to review? The idea thing would have been to first of all have a review of those appointments and contracts and what have you before you begin to make a pronouncement on reversal. So that for me is contradictory, and whoever was in charge of that speech will have taken more time.
Perhaps is to actually put them on notice that this will be reviewed, and saying maybe just
it will have been a notice that there will be a committee to review it, and of course after the review, those who are who are found to be illegal or who are not acceptable, we should by then reverse to the, but ordering that it was specific that all appointments pre-July 17 should reverse to the status quo. So for that, for me, is appropriating and reprobating at the same time, and it's not too good for the first day or the first outing of a governor in place. That to me shows undue use of power when you make such pronouncements without first of all taking due diligence to review. Not all the appointments within that period of time could have been illegal. There are some of them that would have fallen within acceptable standard of governance and civil service. So making a blank statement that all of them should reverse to status quo calls for question. Then number two, in the course of that speech, that is on a light note, a lot of civil servants felt disappointed because part of his campaign promises was the fact that the outstanding salary of civil servants, the half salary that were being held, 15 months that were being held, would be looked into and paid. So a lot of civil servants stayed glued to the television and to the radio yesterday, hoping that there will be a pronouncement or a promise that outstanding salary will be paid within a period of time, hopefully before the Christmas and the New Year, to make it a jolly good one. But unfortunately, such pronouncement was not made. And I would have expected that for a governor who is coming on high hopes, he should have been specific on what is intentional. Of course, somewhere in the speech, he did say that the people should give him a few weeks to make public the details of the 5-point agenda of his campaign. I should say that I took notice of that. I requested for a few weeks to make public the details of the 5-point agenda. So we are having our fingers crossed. A few weeks hopefully will not turn into a few months and maybe more than a year. So if he keeps to his word, in a few weeks, we'll have the details of what his intentions are about the 5-point agenda, which were the premises of his promise during campaign. And by then we can begin to put him on a scale of fulfillment and achievement of what his promises are.
Emmanuel.
Well, he did say yesterday that it will not be business as usual. That's point 8, paragraph 8 of his speech. From agriculture, education, health, mining sector, and all of that, it is no longer business as usual. Then number 9, our administration will demonstrate a high sense of urgency, transparency, justice, and innovation to tackle and solve the problems of poverty, illiteracy, disease, and poor infrastructure. Do you see Governor Adeleke living up to his words in this this poverty, illiteracy, disease, and poor infrastructure?
It will be too early to begin to judge him, but those are very weighty promises. And like I said at the instance of this program, that it's my prayer that God will help him to fulfill promises. One thing that the new governor, Governor Demola Adeleke, will have to contend with is the high hopes of the people. He has raised the hope of the people. People have a lot of expectation from him. People's hope have been risen, are very high from him. So he has no choice than to, from this money, hit the ground running. And I must say this, that he has enough precedence to look at. He had a brother who was at a point in time the governor of this state, and before the demise of this brother, at least it's in the public knowledge that he was pretty close to him. So he must have learned one or two things from the late Isiaka Adeleke about the art of governance, and he has been around long enough. He contested the 2018 election, and then luck smiled on him. He became the governor in 2022. So he has had a lot of time in his hand to have looked at the problems of the state, to have looked about where the people need help, to have looked about the specific purposes of state governance in terms of agriculture, in terms of tourism, in terms of health, and what have you. So he must have had enough time in his hand with the people that he has worked with, either during the campaign or in the process of transition, to have understood the problem of the state and to have decided, to have fashioned out ways of tackling those problems. So all those things that he reeled out yesterday in his speech as not going to be business as usual, it is an hope that he will be able to meet up with those, because promises are different from real governance. You are not going to use your personal fund or the fund of your family to fund the need of the state. So if you come into office and you have good intention, and unfortunately somewhere along the line the money is not forthcoming. I will recall that twice in the last 1 year the Osun State had zero allocation. So these are questions. It should be more important to us as a people that Governor Demola Adeleke should be much more circumspect in enhancing the economy of the state, because whatever becomes of the economy of the state will determine if you are able to fulfill promises in other sectors of the economy that you've mentioned. Agriculture, tourism is only when money is available. So what we should be thinking of is how responsible it would be in terms of fiscal transparency and fiscal management. It's only when he's able to manage the fund of the state, increase the IGR of the state through whatever means that God helps him to, and ensuring that he does not mismanage whatever is left behind, is only then that you can begin to speak to these promises. Because no matter how lofty the ideas are, no matter how interesting the intentions are, if there are no resources to make it happen, they are just going to remain in the realm of promises.
All right. So, just before we let you go, appointments were made yesterday also. So the first set of appointments, we had the Chief of Staff announced, Alhaji Kazim Akinleye. We had the SSG, the Secretary of the State Government, Alhaji Teslim Balayi, and then the governor's spokesperson, Malam Olawale Rashid. What do you make? Is there any pointer? Is there any, reading?
I'm going to try to be very careful. I don't bring my personal opinion into all of this. But the reality is that for any governor, a pointer to either that person will succeed or otherwise is reflective in the kind of appointment he makes at the instance, just like Governor Demola Adeleke made yesterday. The very first few set of appointments made are pointers to the likely success or failure of that administration. Because what you look at is what is the pedigree of these individuals that have been appointed into specific offices. The Constitution is clear, except for in Nigeria and some parts of Africa, where we glorify the office of the Chief of Staff. The office of the Chief of Staff is much more like the personal assistant to the governor, glorified person. He's just in charge of the immediate staff of the governor. But in this part of the world, we have given so much power to the Chief of Staff that is unknown to the Constitution. So whoever is the Chief of Staff, his character, his pedigree, will be a reflection of how he will be able to manage the other appointees of government that are going to come in the latter time. Then number two, if you appoint an SSG, the question would be, what is the pedigree of that person? How much of administration has that person been involved in over time? How much of the books does this person understand? Because this is going to be the point of communication between the government, the people, government of other states, government of the federal government, and even government of nations outside of the country. So how much of international relations does this person know? How much of contact does this person have? How much of civil service rules and governance does this person know? So these are pointers, these are things you use to gauge the capacity of whoever is appointed into office. So without casting a passion on anyone, I hope that the people of the state can begin to put these two, the Chief of Staff and the SSG, on the pedestal some of these things that have been highlighted. And in talking about the spokesperson to the government, which is popularly referred to as the chief press secretary, one would also expect that what is the character of this person? What has been this person's track record? You don't appoint, no governor would want to appoint a spokesperson who will go on radio and go on TV and lambast the citizens or begin to throw tantrums and begin to do name calling and all of that. I'm not saying that is the character of the person appointed, but these are the things we use to gauge going forward.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming this morning to help us with the review of the governor's inaugural speech yesterday, Mr. Ayologun. We appreciate you joining us on Morning Spring.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, that's another leg of the conversation. We'll take a short break and we'll return with our other guest.
It was a Euro-American trade in slaves by which 12.5 million Africans were captured from their indigenous homelands and transported via the Atlantic to Europe and the Americas. The transatlantic slave, also known as triangular trade, was the worst form of man's inhumanity to man and the most costly in human life of all long-distance global migrations. Hundreds of Africans chained tightly to plank beds in the belly of slave ships in horrific conditions were transported via the Atlantic and stripped of all human dignity on arrival in Europe and America. It is the greatest crime the Caucasians committed against the black race. It is impossible to discuss the transatlantic slave trade without a copious reference to impoverishment and underdevelopment of Africa and its peoples. The triangular trade left the continent in ruins. Western Spring Television identifies transatlantic slave trade as a watershed event in history.
Well, thank you very much for keeping faith with us on Western Spring Television. Thank you for joining us again for the other leg of our interview part of the program. Do not forget to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. And do not forget to spread the word. On Twitter, it is at WSTV_NG. We're now joined live in the studio by Chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, Tunji Omole, to further make sense and analyze some of the points, the talking point of Governor Ademola Adeleke's inaugural speech yesterday at the Osogbo Township Stadium. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio this morning.
And thank you for having me.
All right. First, how does it feel to be back in power?
Beautiful feeling. You can see the excitement, the ecstasy that happened in the stadium and in the towns and in the whole of the state yesterday. You know, it was on a Sunday, and it was as if you were having Lagos traffic in Osogbo. So you cannot imagine the joy, the hard work that had come to making this a reality. You can't take it from the fact that God had been very faithful, because this should have happened since, through 2019 elections, that the Abacadabra thing didn't let it happen.
2018, you meant to say?
Pardon?
2018.
2018, you know, and here we are in 2020. It's never late. God is never late. Things that you work for, the successes you crave, they never, when they happen, they give you joy. And then you just have to know that the party, the candidate, the governor now really connects with the people, because the joy permeates through party lines, and everybody is ecstatic about a new beginning, a new dawn. I mean, you can see that the expectations are high. The interest is, it's very comfortable to see that, yes, there's a new thing happening in our Osun State now.
Well, let's go straight to the governor's inaugural speech yesterday. You just talked about governor connecting with the people.
Yes.
Paragraph 10 says your governor will be a people's governor.
Exactly.
How much of interaction with the general public should citizens, residents be expecting in the next 4 years?
This is an amiable, sociable, friendly, down-to-earth, jolly good person. Through the campaign, you saw him interact, is accessible, he feels the pulse of the people, and without even going to the speech, there's a feedback mechanism that he has set in place that, look, the small problems, the big problems, he would be accessible, he would be reachable, and then the first of his appointments are very pointed to that, because these are people that have been on ground in the system, knowledgeable, and had been through it. So, I mean, he is one of the highlights that will show you that, look, he's not going to be cocooned away from the people. He would be there, he would be reachable, he would be accessible, and he's going to connect with the people. So, I mean, the PDP is the party of the people anyway. So we've always been on ground, and it just shows that he will just continue on that path. So there is a connect, there is a fusion of realization of bringing a better Osun State.
Also, I mean, I do hope also that you're aware, aside the euphoria, the enthusiasm, I mean, that we saw yesterday, the euphoria of, I mean, of winning the election, of being sworn in, coming into power 12 years after that, there are huge expectations on the part of the people.
Absolutely.
How do you intend to manage these expectations without disappointing the people?
That takes a lot of hard work. Behind the scenes, there have been a lot of brainstorming, technical meetings. There was a robust transition council that was put in to look at every aspect of governance and drew the roadmap towards the manifesto of the party. Unfortunately, they didn't get the kind of cooperation they needed from the outgoing government, but a lot was done, a lot of groundwork, a lot of expertise was brought to bear, a lot of intelligence was delivered to be tailored through the five-point agenda of this government. It's too early in the day to be ecstatic. They're just going to, I'm sure they're just going to resume office today. They're going to see the path at which they are today, where we are today, and then with the expectation of what they want to do and plot it to, side by side what is in existence. But the reality is, we shouldn't build castles in the sky. It's just going to be resuming first day today, and then you will start seeing the points tick. A prepared government is the one that it just shows you. It came in, you read the speech yesterday, and very important announcements were made for the kickoff, right? I have my chief of staff, I have the SSG, I have my spokesperson. That pivot will take off immediately. Shows that, look, we know what we're doing, know where we're going. That it's not like we're still looking for Mr. A or Mr. B on this issue. It's just that we're going to hit the ground running.
All right. So
and then there is a plan.
Yeah.
There is a plan. There is a policy plan. So that will be implemented as we go. I mean, you can't do everything on day one. Everybody has expectation. The idea is to work assiduously in making realization the promises made. And then some of the things that could be impediments to a smooth takeoff caused by the outgone government is made policy statements about that, and then we go forward from there.
All right, so, you know, you're aware of the palace state of the finance of Osun
State, yes.
Okay, so yesterday, in that inaugural speech, the governor talked about local government reforms.
Yes.
Many people believe that most of the states in Nigeria rely on local government funds to survive. But here, the governor said that in line with a campaign manifesto, our government will ensure local government autonomy in line with the provisions of the Nigeria Constitution. Right. Will restore the lost glory of our local government in order to make them more responsive to the needs of the people at the grassroots. That local government autonomy he promised, are you sure that it's workable?
He had said so, and you should applaud him for that. In the National Assembly has made the law towards the autonomy of the local government. They are the closest to the people, and you see, this is a pyramid. It's from the ground up, isn't it? And if everybody there is okay, it becomes less tedious going up. Now, PDP ruled the state before, and the local government had their autonomy.
You know, but the times have changed.
That's what we're telling you.
Yes.
Yes. if, you see, don't let's be clouded by, if you had done a wrong deed, now think that that wrong deed is the correct thing to do. You are the government, is the governor. So everybody, and if everybody works together, whatever is achieved at the local government level is an achievement of its policy. They will just work symbiotically. They will work in conjunction with each other. They will know what the people want and how it's tailored towards the manifesto, and it will be made. It is only when you are self-centered, you will now say, look, you are the one that will do all the work. Now it is simplified. The local government will do its bit in the governance and the giving them the dividends of the democracy. And at the top of that, it's going to be done. You don't have to be the one to award all your small road contracts or water projects within the grassroots. The idea is having a good focus and working together to achieving that. I think he should be applauded. Other people took other people's money, rendered them useless, and you never felt the governance, I mean, democracy, dividend of democracy in the grassroots. So he's saying, look, let's start from there, and everybody else will be happy. If they're happy there, everybody is happy. That's where the spread is through 30 local government and the area office. So if they're functional and they're effective, I'm sure that it will be difficult for you to say it's a wrong policy
Ocean
direction.
will not rely on the funds of local government to survive.
Don't say it is.
Because the autonomy also perhaps will mean financial autonomy also.
No.
So
what I'm saying is this.
Its funds.
The funds coming to the local governments. The local governments are in Osun State, aren't they? So whatever they do there is going to have, the accumulation of the policies implemented at the grassroots is what will permeate the state, isn't it?
Yeah. So will the state allow the local government to spend its funds? Because the accusation out there about most of the states in Nigeria is that the state government collects the funds of the local government to administer the state, whereas most people believe it should be local government spending local government funds.
And he has said to you, take it at his word as what he said to you, that they would have their autonomy. Now, when it comes to as the events unfold, if you now have a doubt of what he has said, then you can question it. He has said it, and I know that a lot of groundwork had been done by the technical team, the transition team, to lay the foundation of the track the path they're going to follow. So if he says that is it, then that is it. Okay. Except when he doesn't do that, then you would question that.
All right.
Well, so what do you make of the governor's executive orders yesterday, including the freezing of the government bank accounts, the returning to status quo ante of appointment, and all of that? What do you make of those executive orders?
That just shows a governor that thinks and acts without delay. Now, you freeze account. There are suspicion that a lot of things have gone on that they didn't have full knowledge of. Now, let us stop, assess the situation, and then we can move on. If you say somebody had employed several people, want to bulk that into the salary payment, you will pause, look at the poll process, check what is there, and then let go. But if he doesn't do that, then, and so that there are things that are committed into this, perhaps the salary structure or in the appointments, it will be foolery, because it will now be difficult to overturn those when you have committed your funds to them. So let us look at this one, see that it is proper, and then you start moving.
Well, but before the governor was sworn in yesterday, there's been so much talk about the previous administration being vindictive. The governor mentioned it yesterday, that some appointments were made maliciously. And there's a fear that this administration may become what it has criticized, also trying to victimize the previous administration.
Yeah, not, see, if they hadn't, see, it was difficult accepting defeat. Till tomorrow morning, the outgoing government never even congratulated this government, this party and the government for winning the election. If it's like, look, you've lost the election, you're going and you're cooperative, and you see what is going on, there would be no talk of being vindictive. But once you come and there are tons of thousands of people employed the last minute you're going, you do a local government election with, so they say the state doesn't have money. You go after a local government election that thankfully the courts have overturned, that you would have committed a lot of money the government didn't have. You can't blame this man for saying, look, let us start again. Let us look at it. If you've done these things that are wrong, before the people now assume that was the right thing, let us pause on it. If they are reversible, you reverse them. If wasn't necessary and it was done to give problem to the state, you are here, and it is evident that we are not the most financially buoyant state, and somebody callously wastes 1.5 billion or more on a local government election that was not necessary. You were out in a short while and you went on that jamboree. Now, if I say you're wrong, is that being vindictive? No. So you have to look at the last minute policies this government tried to do, and did they do it rightly? If they didn't, then you don't have to hide the fact, because this is like an open book. The government is trying to be as open to the people as possible. I'm sure some of the citizens know that some of these things done last minute was done to put them in a precarious position. The finances are not good. So why go and employ as many people at your own exit? It's not fair.
Okay, so we need to go now, but I would like to thank you most sincerely. So perhaps we'll have you again and again on our channels.
It's my pleasure
to
be
talk
here.
about the new administration. But
it's
Mr.
my pleasure to be here. And I would advise, let us focus on the positives that would come on this government. The cynicism, it's not, if we were cynics in the last election, with the last government, let's be more positive. The more positive we are, the correct vibes that we would create, and we'll work with the government as a team to get to our expected destination.
I'd like to thank you most sincerely for coming. Thank you. Mr. Tunji Omole is a chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, joining us live this morning on Morning Spring. We take a break. When we return, Emmanuel will be here with what's trending.
Well, there's a new sheriff in town. Let's get to see what people are saying and what people are expecting from the new man at the helm of affairs.
All right, so that will be after this break. Thank you very much. Femi Olanikweko is my own name. Good morning.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889, at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children according to official records were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history.
Good morning and welcome to Spring Trends on Western Spring Television, where we bring you what is trending, who is trending, why they are trending, and what people are saying about them. Don't forget to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. My name is Emmanuel Ujadigile. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, for the first time in 12 years, a different political party flag will be flown at the government house in Osun State. Just yesterday, Senator Ademola Adeleke Nuruddin Jackson was sworn in as the 6th democratically elected governor of the state. Now, immediately after that swearing in, a lot of things happened. The governor made a number of executive orders that I would like to show you this morning. If you can see on your screen, you can see the governor giving his speech there. Now, what are people saying about that speech? Now, before I bring you what people are saying about that speech, let me show you some of the talking points, some of the things that the governor made as pronouncement yesterday while reading that speech. The first thing the governor said from paragraph 31 of his speech is, "Let me therefore announce an immediate return to status quo of all fresh appointments, placements, and other major decisions taken by the immediate past administration with effect from the 17th of July 2022. Also, paragraph 39 says, "Consequently, I hereby issue the following directives, which will be backed up with appropriate executive orders: an immediate freezing of all government accounts in banks and other financial institutions, immediate establishment of a panel to carry out an inventory and recover all government assets, and immediate establishment of a panel to review all appointment and major decisions of the immediate past administration taken after the 17th of July 2022. And interestingly, an immediate reversal of the constitutionally recognized name of our state, that's the state Osun State. All government insignia, correspondences, and signages should henceforth reflect Osun State rather than State of Osun, which is unknown to the Nigerian Constitution." Now let's go straight to the comments. What are people saying on social media about the new sheriff in town? What are the expectations? What are some of the criticisms that people are having for Governor Ademola Adeleke? Oluseun Onigbinde says, "Congratulations, Governor Ademola Adeleke, wishing you a successful tenure. Please remember to put the people first at all times and work towards building a productive state that protects human dignity." And this is Akin Akinwale says, "Governor Ademola Adeleke said all major decisions taken from July 17, 2022 return to status quo. Oshogbo Iwo Ibadan Road Rehabilitation Contract, it was jointly awarded by Governors Oyetola and Makinde. Interesting times ahead." Interesting times ahead indeed. We hope to see what will happen. And this is from the Kabiyesi Olowo of Owokuta, Oba Adekunle Oyolude Makama. It says, "My kingdom and I felicitate with our governor, Senator Nuruddin Jackson Ademola Adeleke. As you mount the saddle of leadership of our dear state, may God grant you the wisdom and strength to excel beyond expectations." Extract of your policy statements, local government reforms. I talked about some of the promises made by the government in terms of local government. And it says, "May God guard and help you, Mr. Governor, to implement your policies. May your tenure usher in peace and progress. Congratulations, Imole. Royalty is natural service to mankind." And on Facebook, this one says, "Abdulhamed Abdurrahman Ayotunde, this is what you aimed to become. Congratulations. God Almighty will surely ask you and your predecessor how you rule Osun. That feels like a threat to the governor. If you like, make false promises. God is waiting. May God give you power, strength, and good hearts to do well. Still on Facebook, Babatunde Onyilade says, God help you, sir. Please don't compromise, though, because we have heard more than this before from politicians. And just beneath it, Hindia Ori says, I can see he has plans even before becoming the governor. I wish him the best. That's all from Facebook. And moving over to Instagram, Dan Pound says, dancing governor took his first executive order. A nice one. Dissolve everything like the military. This person has a specialty for dissolving things. Omar Onawa says, still on Instagram, this man will develop that state, Sha. A happy man is always with a good heart. You see him dancing all the time, smiling. Trust me, with such man, you can turn your back and be safe. That's still, that was on Instagram. And now back to Facebook. Unsu Francis Olorunwa says, your primary objectives are priorities and other improvements are your record-breaking. Kindly govern with fear of God and carry everyone along irrespective of tribes, religions, and party. And also remember that it is God that gives power to whosoever he wishes. Congratulations. So back to Twitter. Demika Batified says, with the swearing in of Ademola Adeleke and some of the decisions he announced, I can confidently say that Osun State is now slowly on reverse gear. Government is supposed to be a continuum, but it's like Adeleke wants to play to the gallery, and I pity the people of Osun because it looks okay now. Now, you can't have positive comments every time. That's coming from someone who obviously doesn't agree with the new governor. Peter Chuki on Instagram says, after what happened in Anambra, Baba frees the account. Nigeria must be better. You know, say billions fit waka. Yes, of course, back to Twitter. Cappuccino. This Ademola Adeleke is just a free and happy man. I doubt if he has any problem. Osun people go enjoy this man by God's grace. Bad people no go mislead him. Imole. That's the insignia of Governor Ademola Adeleke. And this is coming from Francis Adeboye Oyetola, and APC boys didn't expect this day to come, but God is not dead. Ademola Adeleke is officially the 6th executive governor of Osun State. And Bello Odunayo Christiana says, congrats to you, sir, and a big congratulations to we, the people of Osun, them. I pray and hope your tenure bring good tidings to us. The wisdom, knowledge, and understanding needed by you as a leader shall greatly be granted unto you. Osun Adara, Ikmile Osun Ibaje, proudly Osun breed. And there you can see the picture of Senator Ademola Jackson Nuruddin Adeleke, the executive governor of Osun State. Now, away from the executive governor, let's go over to his immediate past predecessor, Governor Oyetola. Now, yesterday, after Governor Adeleke was sworn in, Governor Oyetola put out a statement on social media. I'd like to show you some of the things that Governor Oyetola said. He said a lot of things, but I picked 5 points for you to look into this morning. He says, number one, he left behind a total sum of 14 billion naira cash in the state's coffers. That's what the governor is saying. Number two, 8 billion naira expected between December and January from performance in state fiscal transparency, accountability and sustainability, and the IGR, plus $72 million from RAMP 3, NG Cares, Nigeria for Women Project, and Ease of Doing Business. Number three, the outgone governor said he successfully paid 97 billion naira from the total debt inherited in 2018 when he assumed office, and he brought about astronomical increase in GDP of the state. Number four, he said he did not take any loan, any bank loan facility, but benefited from 3 billion naira monthly intervention from the federal government to all the state for 6 months. That's what the governor is saying, the outgone governor. And he looks forward to continue to govern Osun and believes that he shall be back soon. Now let's go to what people are saying on Facebook. Right Honorable Adejinle says, Alhamdulillah, no one has it all. You have tried your best, though. No government can satisfy its people. I wish Baba better and fruitful life after leaving office. I think he will use this medium to adjust when there's another opportunity to serve. This is coming from Dr. Ademola Bayonle, who was a candidate of the YPP in the July 16 governorship election. It says, power is transient. Farewell. That's quoting the speech. Oh, wow. And you can see on your screen there, as someone just put up a picture of Osun, and Osun made a helicopter. It says, Iragbiji way. That means the governor should take this helicopter back to his hometown of Iragbiji. Well, that's not the governor waving, that's someone else waving there. But this person, 2020, Wicked OG2 says, Iragbiji way, replying to Governor Adegboyega Oyetola. Otto Mirak says, increased IGR by 100%. No single loan from the bank and financial institutions, yet paid 97 billion debt from previous administration. Like he said, his tenure isn't over. This is just an eclipse of the sun. I must remind you that in Governor Oyetola's speech yesterday, he said that he looks forward to coming back to Osun to govern and that it's just a matter of time before he returns. Do not forget that the case is in court. Governor Oyetola is challenging the declaration of Governor Ademola Adeleke, who was declared by INEC as winner of the July 16th governorship elections. We'll go back to the comments now. Speak It Forth says, I'm sure this will be a great lesson to you if only you humble yourself and learn. Power is transient. Today, you are no longer called governor, but former, and there's no immunity and all the executive treatment anymore. So learn to serve the people well when given an opportunity. That is an advice for all politicians. Power is transient. Today you are there, tomorrow you are no longer there. Now the governor, Governor Oyetola, will be referred to as a former governor, and he will no longer have executive treatment, according to what this person is saying on social media. Back to Facebook, Akimbote Adenike Ayode says, thank you, my governor, for a successful tenure. I believe you're coming back stronger. You're stepping aside just to let Osun people know the difference between a mere dancer and administrator, sir. God be with you. Let the Dende Joe that Osun people vote for not turn to something else before you come back, sir. As on Facebook, Benson Olumoroti Bawain says, in the next few weeks, Osun people will learn the real good, the difference between the two choices they have made. You have done your best, the most humble politician of our time. You are indeed a rare gem. God bless you and make your desires come true. Still on Facebook, Ayeko Uto Otito Ni Yoleke says, Your Excellency, I warned and told you about 2 years ago that you are in glass house and that you should take things easy. I even said, Baba Jaja Omolemamu, I want chief's aides and entourage Toeni. I think he's trying to say that some of the aides of Governor Oyetola were deceiving him, that he warned Governor Oyetola 2 years ago. Congrats so far. I wish you well at your endeavors. But still on Facebook, Omishoyo Light Unit says, former Osun State Governor, with all the write-up, you can't wish incoming governor well. Osun rejected you and voted you out. After election, you showed us your true color. I hope I got that correctly. But Amosi Rashid Moshebola says, we really appreciate you, sir, but we don't need you again as Osun governor. Thanks. And now back to Twitter before we go. Ustad Tasiu says, farewell, Your Excellency. You tried your best, but the people of Osun collectively agreed that your best wasn't much. I wish you best of luck in your next endeavor. You can try business or farming. That's quite some advice for the outgoing governor. You can try business or farming, but we do wish Governor Adegboyega Oyetola well in all of his next endeavors. Thank you for staying with us on Spring Trends on Western Spring Television. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can follow me on Twitter at EM Ujiadugele. My name is Emmanuel Ujiadugele. Have a wonderful one day.
It's time for a brain booster.
Which object will not create a shadow? A glass? A phone? A dog? It's a glass. A glass